Hey, all you sleuths, spies, and sneaky code writers. This is part 2 of Ciphers and Codes, and I'm going to get right into the slideshow. Today we have about 5 more different codes that we're going to explore. They're kind of a unique approach to coding and thinking about letters and numbers. So I hope you like it. All right, this slideshow is Codes and Ciphers, Part 2, where we'll talk about Pigpen, Morse code, a phone system, grid, and the polybias square. This is kind of a fun little section of codes to think about, and hopefully some new ones that you haven't seen before. The first one we're going to talk about is the Pigpen cipher. I have 2 slides about this. This cipher combines the tic-tac-toe board shape over here and an X, and that provides enough spaces for all 26 letters of the alphabet. And what you'll do, if I was writing the letter A, you'll see down here, I just am writing the outline of the box or the part of the box that it's in. Now, you'll notice A and B are both in the same box up here. The way that I indicate which letter it is that I want you to use is the second letter gets a dot. So A and B look identical except for this dot that's in here. When you get over here to the X, here's an example of S and T. S is just going to be this V shape that it sits in. And V, since it's a second letter, will be that same V shape with a dot in it. And then this is coded I love you. I is the very center box, so it looks like a square. L is the second letter over here. And so it has that open-ended right-hand side with a dot in it. And O is the first letter. And so it has that upside-down box. And so on all the way through. It's a fun clue chain because it looks funny. It looks a lot like gibberish, but once you, again, like all of these things, once you know the code, you know how to break it. Here's another slide about the Pigpen cipher, and it has the letters broken out in 2 different tic-tac-toe boards and 2 different X's. It's important. I think we should also note that it came about during the 18th century and was used by the Freemasons. It's, let's go back. And down here we have another key to show you which letter we're using depending on if it's the first or second letter, which one gets the dots. So Pigpen cipher, I would encourage you to give that one a try. That's one that almost everyone loves and is pretty easy to decode. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Morse code, and I'm going to include a video for you to watch separately. It's really a really neat, there were a lot of things that I learned about Morse code when I was getting this together. First of all, it was named after Samuel Morse, who invented the telegraph. And obviously we know graph means writing and tele means over distance. And so Morse code was a code that was developed to be able to send messages when you wanted to send with either bursts of light or with bursts of sound, or you could also write it down. So each letter is a combination of long or short beeps in combination. So you can transmit it like if you were on a ship and you needed to transmit information to another ship off in the distance, you could flash light, or you could also do it by sound. Here's the part I didn't know. It is based on a dichotomous tree, which we covered earlier this year, where you're making a choice of between 1 or 2 things. And in this case, we're making a choice between a dash and a dot. And Morse code is set up with the frequency of letters. How often do we say letters or use letters in the alphabet? And we talked about it yesterday or in a previous slideshow, part 1, where E over here is one of the most commonly used letters. And if you are at the start, you're going to say, should I use a dot or a dash? Anytime you're going to move to the right in this tree, you're going to add a dot. So in Morse code, E is just 1 dot. Now, if I wanted to spell ear, I would do 1 dot for E. And now am I going to the left or right to spell ear? E-A-R. I'm going to the right. So A would be a dot and then a dash. And then notice to spell ear, I'm going to the right again. So if I were going to spell ear, it would be dot for E, dot dash for A. And now I'm going to the right again. So it would be dot dash dot for R. So using this tree, you can figure out what Morse code combination is for any letter. And here they are listed out. So A is dot dash, just like we talked about. B is dash dot dot dot. The less used letters, the letters that are used less frequent, have more dots and dashes in them. Because obviously, if you're trying to spell something out quickly, you would, and it's a letter that we use very often in the English language, we would want to communicate that with as few dots and dashes as possible. The video that I'm going to share with you is also really good. The man that made the video has a really clever way of remembering what each of these letters sounds like. So follow up with a little bit more Morse code. You can also write this out, obviously. Phone characters. So some of you may have seen old style phones where the numbers are on the phone pad to dial, but also on the pad are 3 sets of letters. So for example, on 2, you have A, B, and C. 3, you have D, E, and F. And this is a coding pattern where, for example, if I wanted to say the number 2, and I wanted to say the letter A, I would write down 2 just one time. But if I wanted the letter B, I would write 2, 2, because it's the second letter listed on the 2 button. And then for C, I would press it 3 times, 2, 2, 2. So it's a little tricky. If I wanted to say J, I would say 5, right? One time. So you have to make sure that you leave the correct number of spaces in between, or make sure that your spacing looks good, because it'd be confusing to have a space between something. It might send the wrong sort of message. So you could use phone characters to send a code as well. You would obviously want to give people the number pad so that they knew what letters were on each number. Now we have grids and mazes. Grids, really, it's pretty a simple idea where you would put all the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way through Z in a grid format. And so if I were going to say, I wanted to spell my name, Carol, my first letter would be A3, right, for a C. My second letter would be A1 for an A. And then for R would be D2. So over here it says, what does D4, A3, D3 spell? Well, D4 is T, right? A3 is C, and D3 is S. So would spell TCS. It's a really nice, easy way to use coordinates. That's what these are called, coordinates, where you give the row and the column. And we saw that also with the Vigenère square yesterday, where you're doing rows and columns. This is a simpler version of a Vigenère square. This down here is an example of a maze. It's not really exactly a clue or a code, but if you wanted to create a code using a maze, as people go through the maze, they would collect the correct letters. And if I hit a block, I would know that, like here, I would know that that's not the correct way to go. The only way to get through the maze is one way, and you're collecting letters in order as you go to spell out and solve a clue. So that's just another alternative way to set up a clue. This is the polybias square. Again, it's a grid. It's similar to the one that I just showed you. So instead of having letters across the top and numbers down the side. This has numbers on both sides. So 1, 2 is a B, a 1, 1 is an A, and a 4, 4 is a T. So it's just a variation on that grid that I already showed you. Instead of having numbers and letters, it just has numbers only. So those are a few more options for you in terms of coding. Whenever you are sending a message, you want to make sure that the person who's receiving it has enough information. They need to have the key in order to break the code, or they need to be familiar with what it is that you are, the type of message that you're sending before you send the message. So all of these codes require that both the sender and the receiver have important pieces of information in order to solve. So happy making clues and happy deciphering, and we will see you later.